Hello, everyone. This is Robin, the Laughing Crone, and today is Friday,
Woo!
TGIF. But we're finishing strong on the 5-day leadership challenge and with Rosie Noel. Rosie is a certified Clifton Strengths coach. She specializes in helping people like you harness the power of your unique strengths and that truly is when I use the word unique, I don't use it lightly. And by delving into these Clifton Strengths profile, which she's a master at, I have been so impressed with her. Every time I've heard her speak, I've walked away with my mouth open. So, so Rosie is going to help you uncover your innate talents and abilities and provide invaluable insights as to how you can thrive in every aspect of your life, whether you're seeking career advancement, whether you're interested in development as a leader, or simply a deeper understanding of yourself. I know you're going to enjoy Rosie today and walk away with a new understanding and greater confidence and an ability to achieve the fulfillment you want to achieve. I'm so excited to introduce Rosie Noel to you. Welcome, Rosie.
Hey, thank you. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you for that. And
Well, it comes from my heart. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I've been in awe of you since the day I met you. And when I took Clifton Strengths, and by the way, I hope that everybody in the listening audience has taken that step because it's an eye opener. And I'm just grateful to you for giving me that additional insight. And that's the truth. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I This morning I was talking to my husband about how I was going to be doing a live stream with you today, and I was telling him a little bit about you, and the same thing. I've just found I think that what you've accomplished in your life is very impressive, and you're also such a you have really positive energy that I think you share. I've just felt that from the moment that I met you too, and it's helped to liven me up. I remember the first time I spoke at an event, like a big event outside of my corporate world. I started my coaching business shortly before we met, and it was my first big event I was speaking with. I don't know if you just sensed I was nervous, but you like came over to me and you gave me a
Yeah.
compliment on something, and you were just so kind. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was just I will always remember that because it helped me ease my nerves in being in totally out of my comfort zone. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. And it came from the heart. I saw you, and it was just like a light walking into the room. And I needed to share that with you because I could tell that you were not altogether comfortable and confident in that light that is just natural to you. So
Mm,
I'm going to leave stage and let you take it from here. But
thank
welcome,
you.
welcome, Rosie.
Thanks so much, Robin. Thank you. So hi everybody. As Robin mentioned, my name's Rosie Noel, and you probably heard just a moment ago me talk about a little bit of my history, but today, I am a strengths coach. I formerly was in the corporate world doing strengths coaching, and I'll talk a lot more about what that means. But I was doing strengths coaching in the corporate world. I worked as a vice president, in executive coaching and talent development management. So on the corporate side, I not only did coaching, but I also led within our organization around building out learning and training curriculum. So whether it was somebody fresh out of college and building out a learning curriculum for them, or people that were senior in their careers and growing as leaders. So I handled the gambit of learning and development in that space. And I also did a lot around talent management. So helping to make sure we had the right talent strategies, the right jerseys on the right players, a lot of that stuff in the corporate world as well. So, hello everyone. And I don't know who Chunky Chew Jew is, but I love your YouTube handle. So welcome. And I don't know how in this audience, it's been a little, it's been a couple months since I've been on StreamYard, but I do try to make my presentations a little bit interactive. So for those of you who are there, hey Ahmed, I would love to have you participate as well. So just a little bit more about me in the context of what I'm going to be talking about with you all today. As I mentioned, I was in the corporate world for over 15 years and I launched my coaching business. I'm right over my 1 year anniversary of launching my own coaching business. I left my corporate job at the end of last year. So I'm a newer entrepreneur, not a new coach, but definitely new to running my own business. I'm based out of Chicago. I've got two small boys. So I'm married. I have a 2-year-old and 4-year-old boys. So a great time to launch a new business, right? With two toddlers at home, but it's been a lot of fun so far. And I'm really excited to just be sharing and focused on something that is really important to me and has not only helped me personally in so many ways, but I've seen the power and impact of doing this at within my former organization. We were like a Fortune 1000, about 10,000 employees, and we rolled out this concept of strengths within the organization. So I've had the luxury of seeing the impact of working from your strengths with individuals and entrepreneurs as well as organizations. So I'll talk a lot more about that today and this concept of working from your strengths. Last thing I want to say about myself within, if you can see on the slide here, it's a little bit small, but at the bottom, it says I'm a strengths coach, and beneath that, there's 5 words. And those words are tied to my Clifton strengths. So for anybody that is in the chat, drop a 1 if you've heard of either Clifton Strengths or Strengths Finder. So if you've heard of Clifton Strengths or Strengths Finder before, just curious, drop a 1 in the chat if it's something you've heard of before. Clifton Strengths used to be called Strengths Finder, and it's been around for it's rooted in over 50 decades of research. I can't remember what year they actually released it, but they rebranded it as Clifton Strengths a few years ago. So if you've heard of Strengths Finder, similar in concept, and the words that you see at the bottom of the slide, those are my top 5 strengths, and I will share. Okay, well, if you haven't heard of it, you'll learn about what I want to do is I'm coming into today assuming that a lot of the audience has not heard of Clifton Strengths before, or if they have, they haven't taken the assessment. And so I'm going to approach the conversation from that lens of you probably haven't heard of this before. I'm going to educate you on why it's so powerful and the impact that it can have. And then this way, if it is something that you're interested in, you have enough resources from today's session to go. If you do go off and take your assessment, you'll have enough information to be dangerous with to do more with it than if you just order the assessment and read it and didn't have the context. So to talk about just my number one Clifton Strengths theme is input. And when you see that word, you're probably like, I don't know what that word means about a strength. How is input a strength? So that's my number one strength. It means I like to collect, archive, and aggregate information, data, even relationships. I just like to know a wide variety of people. And then my number 4 strength is the fourth from the end there, or second from the end, fourth in is individualization. And that means I can naturally see what's unique about people and identify what their strengths are. And that goes back to my corporate experience of I like to put the right jerseys on the right players. And so when I combine my input of loving data, knowledge, collecting that information and sharing that information out, that's a part of input is input needs an output. I like to share everything I collect with the individualization of seeing what's unique about people. When I put those 2 strengths together, I think that's a big part of what makes me a good coach is that I can see what's unique about people and then I share things with them that will help them elevate the ways that they're unique and dive deeper into that as well. So we'll talk more. There's a lot of language in Clifton Strengths that takes some time to get used to. So I will try not to get us too deep into the language. But first, one of the things I love to talk about when I am just going into the concepts of Clifton Strengths and why I think it's so powerful is this concept of like We do live in a world where we're told to be so many things, and that was the case prior to social media, but we're also now in a world where social media is just such a prevalent part of people's day to day, and so if we were getting messages before in the world that were telling us what we needed to do, what we needed to look like, the strengths that were good strengths, the strengths that were less valuable strengths, right? Like, we're sent all of these messages about who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be it, and it's really difficult because of all of that to understand, okay, well, like, who am I today? What are the things that I have that are unique? And how do I start to embrace those things more and worry less about the things that I think I'm supposed to have or that I think I'm supposed to do or somebody else has told me that I'm supposed to have or do? And so I think that's a lot of the power of Clifton Strengths and just what I get so much energy around in this realm is helping people to embrace who they are and work from what they have rather than beating themselves up for what they don't have or who they're not. And part of my energy from a personal level comes from like my own experience of having gone through that. As I mentioned, I was in the corporate world for over 15 years, and I went to school to be a high school math teacher, and but I after student teaching, I was like, God bless teachers because student teaching alone burnt me out. I have so much respect for teachers. It was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my life. And so I decided to go down the math route instead of the teaching route. And so I worked as an actuary and a consultant. And so I had a highly technical background prior to discovering coaching. And it was very empty. The consulting side of what I did was very empty for me. And I was struggling with my mental health. Like, it was just I was so exhausted and so de-energized in what I was doing. And in my head, I was like, there's got to be something better. But I was just so entrenched in what I was doing. It was hard to pull my head out and say, like, if there is something else, how do I even begin to discover what that is? And so I decided to take a coaching course, a coaching certification course. It was something I was always interested in, but I was afraid. I was like, Is coaching even a real job? Like, it just sounds, I don't know. It didn't sound like a real job. I was afraid coming from a highly technical background. I was like, would somebody pay me just to talk to them about things? So I enrolled in a coaching course and I ended up loving it. And I was introduced to this concept of ikigai when I was in my coaching course, and it helped to crystallize so many things for me. So I'd be curious in the chat just to share if you've heard of this concept of ikigai before. I'll share a little bit about what it is and why I think it's so powerful and ties to this work that I do around Clifton Strengths. So ikigai is okay. Yes, Robin, you learned about it in a coaching course too. So ikigai it stands for a reason for being. It's a Japanese word and concept. Um, okay, Chunky Chuju, you got to tell me what your first name is, just so that I don't keep calling you Chunky Chuju because I will and I like it. Or maybe I'll just call you CCJ. But if you don't give me your name, so ikigai is the intersection of four things. So the things that give you a reason for being is when you can check these four boxes. Four boxes. So one is what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you're good at. And when you can check all four of those boxes, that's when you have your ikigai. That's when you have your reason for being. And when I saw that in my coaching course, I was still at my corporate job. I was pursuing the coaching course separately. So I was still doing consulting, and it was like a slap in the face for me because if you look in like the bottom left corner, there's the words that say comfortable, but a feeling of emptiness. So you can see three boxes are checked: what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. And I was certainly checking those three boxes, but what was missing was what I loved. It was not what I loved. And okay, yeah. So a couple of you, it's new for. And this, right, I didn't create this diagram. But this diagram I think is really cool because it basically says, okay, if you have two of these boxes checked, right? If you just are doing something that you love and something that you're good at, it's a passion. But if you can't get paid for it and the world doesn't need it, it's just a passion. And I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial or a geriatric millennial, but still a millennial. And right? Like I grew up with this concept of like you should be passionate about the work that you do, but passion is not enough. You have to be paid, be able to get paid for it, right? And you have to be filling a need in the world. It's not enough to just be passionate about it. And so for me, I was missing what I loved. And now since I have been able to step into coaching, that's when I finally brought in that aspect of what I love, what the world needed, what I could get paid for, and what I was good at. And so I love the model of Ikigai as it pertains to the type of coaching that I do, because I do strengths-based coaching. And strengths are a very helpful compass to help you understand at a baseline what you're good at, right? Your Clifton Strengths help you to identify your innate talents and learn how to use those things intentionally. So, at a baseline, it helps you understand what you're good at. It also kind of second in line in what it helps you do is identify what you love. It kind of gives you a roadmap to say, okay, these are the things that I'm good at. What within those things energize me? Which within those things light me up? Or when I use this strength, what are the times when I use it that I really get excited about it, right? I'll use an example. Competition is an example of a Clifton Strengths theme. And so just because you are good, you are naturally competitive, so it might be something you're good at, doesn't mean you love competing in all things and you want to win in every single area of your life. And so identifying, well, what aspects of winning do you love, right? And so those two things, I think the Clifton Strengths assessment are really helpful at helping you build out foundationally. But then I also think it serves as a compass to identify some of these other things. If you have these as a foundation, right? Like if you're not good at it, it's going to be really hard to get paid for it. And it's going to be really hard to fill a gap in what the world needs. So that's where it's like, if you can kind of start from this, what you're good at, we can build through coaching. Okay, how does that translate to what you're doing today? Or how does that help us identify if you're in a place like where I was, where I'm like, I'm miserable, but I have no idea where to start. It can be a compass to say, well, maybe start looking at these types of careers or these types of areas that you'd be interested in. And so it helps to kind of narrow down an infinite amount of possibilities into something that feels more palatable. So if you haven't heard of Ikigai, it's something honestly that changed my life, just conceptually and giving me permission to say, okay, yes, no wonder I feel empty in what I'm doing, and I actually can pursue something that makes that emptiness go away. So to move into these concepts around Clifton Strengths and just kind of hearing from some of you on most of you so far I've heard are not familiar with Clifton Strengths, so I'll be mindful of that as we go. Um, but so many people want to know what we're naturally good at, right? Like I don't think I've met a single person who's like, no, I don't want to know what I'm good at, or I don't want to know what my strengths are. More often than not, people are like, I want to know what my strengths are, but I just don't know. Either I don't know what they are, I don't know how to articulate them, and I don't know how to help somebody else see them, and I definitely don't know how to translate them into something that's productive. And so that's what I love about this concept of Clifton Strengths. There's an assessment you can take. There's a couple different ones, and just to say, like, I don't promote Clifton Strengths. I don't make any money off of the assessment. But the assessment's $60, and yeah, Robin, I think it would be cool to I have a sample report in here. Um, but certainly if you want to kind of when we're done to kind of share, I can even give a quick overview of your strengths too. So we could certainly pull in something like that. But the assessment itself, the full assessment is $60. There's also a $25 version that gives you just your top 5 strengths. I do recommend getting the $60 version because if you get the top 5 for $25 and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I want the full report now, it's another $50 to get the full report. Now you spend $75. You may as well just get the $60 report. It's really the only report you need. And there's so many resources that you can get from this. I'll share more. I have so many free resources. And my Instagram handle is at the Rosie Noel, where I talk a ton about Clifton Strengths. I do free Zooms. Gallup, who created the Clifton Strengths assessment, has hundreds, if not thousands, of free podcasts you can listen to on Clifton Strengths. So just having the report alone, there's tons of free resources you can tap into to understand the report, what it means, and specifically how to use it. So the full report is called the Clifton Strengths 34 report. And you can order that. I can drop a link in the chat. Actually, let me do that now, just for you to have if it's something that you're interested in ordering. And if you order it through me, you get a couple extra resources, and you can also get information about joining my free Facebook group. So so I'll share an example of what that report looks like, but I don't want to get too caught up in too many of the weeds on the report if you haven't taken it yet. So I would love, since we've got a couple people that are engaging in the chat, can you drop a 1 or a yes in the chat if you are somebody that almost always talks to people in elevators, airplanes, stores, wherever you go? Let's drop a 1 or a yes. I don't know how much of a lag there is, so I'll kind of go slow. 1 or a yes. All right, I'm going to go to the next one. What about if you sometimes? Yes, say Robin. I'm like, sometimes. Yes. Okay. Chunky Chuju, yes, ish. Yes. So yeah, sometimes that might mean it's something you do sometimes, but not 100% of the time. We'll talk about what that means. So what about this one? You have a color coded or otherwise organized closet. So 1 or yes in the chat, Robin, yes. I'm a no. I will color code it and organize it, and it will stay that way for a week, and then it will be gone again. Okay. Okay, so a few of you, interesting. Okay. We'll talk about that. What about write down a list of things to do on the weekend and stick to it? So a 1 or a yes if that is you. Um, and sometimes people see this, they're like, "Well, yes, I do, but I don't always get all the things done that I want," right? And that's me. Like I stick to it, but usually my list is like 50 things and it's just unrealistic to get to it. Okay, we got a no and a yes. I love it. 2 yeses and a no. All right. What about if you need to pick someone to race while you're driving? This is one of my favorite ones. And I think there's one more that is my all-time favorite. Um, so a yes. Yeah, Robin's a no. Yeah, I'm also a no on that one. Ahmed's a yes. Okay. Um, what about my FCCJ just sounds weird. So I'm gonna stick with Chunky Chuju. Also a no. Okay, so we got one racer. Oh wait, no, there's 2 more. Okay, what about if you almost always figure out the plot of the movie before anyone else does? Okay, NS20U also said yes. Like we got 2 racers. I'm bad. No, it's not bad to race. It's good. We'll talk about how that is actually a talent. Okay. Chunky Choo says yes to figuring out the plot of the movie before anyone else does. Ahmad also says yes. Let's see. Last one. This is my favorite one. I don't know why. It just cracks me up. If you almost always push the button to remind the elevator that you're there. Um, I am not that person unless I'm like really feeling impatient. Um, yeah. Okay, so a couple yeses. And whoo, I got a sneeze coming. No, okay. Couple no's, couple yeses. So the reason I like that activity, other than it's just fun, right? Like it helps us to understand what Gallup, who created the Clifton Strengths assessment, means when they say talent. Like when we were going through that activity, I'm sure that in the majority of them, they weren't something you think of as talents. They're just things you naturally do think and feel, right? Nobody tells you to have a color coded closet. You just do it. Ahmed says he always pushes. Yeah. um, yes. Like all of these things, if you look on the green part of the slide on the right, these are all examples of talent. Starting a conversation with somebody you haven't met before. If you are in any type of sales role, that is absolutely a talent that you can use very intentionally and strategically in that role. If you are somebody that color codes your closet, right? That's this one of thinking in an orderly and timely manner. That is absolutely helpful in so many different types of roles at work. So whether you do operations or you are in any sort of role where you have to be disciplined and stick to things and work through a rhythm, all of that are so yes, you might not think of having a color coded closet as a talent, but it absolutely is. And it can be applied productively in so many ways. And so what the Clifton Strengths assessment says is, let's identify the things that you naturally do, think, and feel the most of. And so what they do, you take a test, it's like 167 questions, and it times you. You only get 20 seconds to answer each question, and it will time out. You can't answer it if you time out. So it wants your first instinct when you're answering these questions. And through answering these questions, it says, okay, we've identified the 10 things you do think and feel the most of, and it calls those your dominant or top talents. The goal is to turn those talents into strengths, excuse me. So you'll hear kind of strengths, talents used interchangeably, but essentially, talent is raw, right? That like pushing the elevator button or racing somebody while driving. Those are things that not everybody does those things. Not everybody answered yes to every single scenario that I brought up. So that tells us like talents are unique, right? Not everybody does all of these behaviors and not everybody does them for the same reasons, but our talents are unique. Not everybody does, thinks, and feels the same pattern of things. So it's like identifying what talents are unique to you, what things you naturally do think and feel the most of, and then learn how to strengthen those things. And so, not, just because you're talented at it doesn't automatically make it a strength. Just because you're somebody who can strike up conversations with strangers naturally doesn't automatically make it a strength. It could be a weakness if you're striking up conversations with strangers and people don't want to talk to you because you can't read the room, right? That's not a strength. That's not your talent showing up as a strength. The talent showing up as a strength is striking up a conversation with a stranger, and maybe that leads to a networking opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise had, right? Or it opens up a door for further conversations on an area of interest. And so the goal is to say, what are the things I naturally do think and feel the most of, and how do I turn those things into strengths? And so what I love, I have a math background, right? Like data, statistics, all of that is very, very much a big part of my education and my corporate background. So anything that has data, statistics, a formula of any form, it really, really gets me going. And so this is my favorite formula, which is talent times investment equals strength. Clifton Strengths flips the script that we traditionally have been told around developing strengths. Most of us grew up, and I would say even today, we are told, okay, yeah, you're already good at some things, but like, let's find out what you're bad at and let's get better at that. And Clifton Strength says, no, we don't want to go from bad to okay. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be exhausting, and you're not going to see results from it. Let's find out what you're good at and go from good to great. And for the things you're bad at, it doesn't say ignore those things, right? It doesn't say oh, well, everybody, it's participation trophy. We just only get to worry about the things we're good at. No, but it says don't pour your energy into the things that you're bad at. Find strategies for how you make sure they don't get in your way. And if there are, so, and I'll talk about what some of those strategies are. So some of those are, how do you use your talents to solve for the things that you're bad at, right? So it's not saying, okay, if I'm really bad at having a color coded closet, I have to force myself to be that person. Sometimes it's like, no, do I actually need to be a person that has a color coded closet? For me, the answer is no. I would like to, but no. If it is like, no, I need to, for whatever reason, it's necessary. So it's like, okay, well, is there somebody else who's really good? Is my husband really good at color coding closets? And maybe if he is and he gets energy from that, maybe that's something he does. And maybe there's something I can take off his plate that I'm better at and get energized from. So it's like, can you pull on somebody else's talents? And if the answer is no, my husband doesn't have this talent either. I have to do it. I have to have a color coded closet. It's like, how do I use then the talents that I do have to help motivate me to get at that thing? So we'll talk again more about this as we go, but think about like where you should be investing in your talents. Your talents are the areas you should be spending time, energy, and resources. And this is why. This is one of the reasons why. I'll hit on some more research around this, but a lot of people are familiar with Gallup. Can you put a one or a yes in the chat if you've heard of Gallup before? They're a large consulting management consulting company, excuse me. And a lot of people know them for their polls. Yes, like Gallup surveys, Gallup polls, they do global polls. Um, And so, okay, yes, Chunky Chuju, you're familiar with them as well. And so that's part of I used to coach on the DISC assessment as well in the corporate space. There's Myers Briggs, Enneagram, all of those. And what I love about Clifton Strengths is it's based in a ton of research and it's backed by somebody like Gallup that is a huge research based organization. And so, this is not just rah rah, okay, we get to work from our strengths. That's great. It feels good. It's also a um it's you can see here on this slide, like the research that they've done about the concept of working from strengths. You have a higher quality of life and you're more engaged in your work. And so to me, that's huge. It says when you work from your strengths on a daily basis, you feel better. And that goes back to like the ikigai. Like it's just more a holistic experience when you work from your strengths. And the spoiler alert, the last slide I have, but now I'm like, I want to share it now because I love these statistics too, which is it's not just that you have a higher quality of life. It's not just that you feel better and more engaged in your work. It also ties to higher productivity. So individuals that work from their strengths every day are 9% more productive. Teams that work from their strengths every day are 13% more productive. So it's extremely powerful for individuals. And it's even more powerful for teams because you have that benefit, like I mentioned before with my husband, where it's like, okay, I can pull on what he has, he can pull on what I have. It works the same in teams, right? So it's even more productive when teams can work from their strengths every day because they can pull on the best of from each other. So I kind of hit on this already. So these are the words that you would see. Some of like you saw in my top 5, right? I hit on like input, intellection, individualization. Some of those were in there. So with the way that Gallup defines talent is anything you naturally do think and feel the most of that you can apply productively. And so when we define talent in that way, right, not talent like singing ability or right, like talent in sports, for example, right? When we define talent as things you naturally do think and feel the most of, there's an infinite amount of talents that people have. Even in that exercise, we went through 5 or 6 examples, right? Those are just day-to-day things you wouldn't even think of as talents, but they certainly are. And so what Gallup did is, okay, our definition allows for an infinite amount of talents to exist. So let's start to group them together and identify common themes that we see among these talents. And so that's where you see these 34 themes. So themes are groupings of talents. So, for example, if you are somebody who likes to naturally strike up conversation with strangers, you might be high woo. And it's funny because Robin, you said sometimes, like my answer is sometimes. My woo is number 14 in my report. So that means it's not dominant, but I turn it on and off. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I want to talk to a stranger and I feel good. And other times I'm like, please do not talk to me. I just want to sit in silence. Right. And that's my high intellection is in my top 5. So right, like, but other attributes of people that are high woo is they can naturally they can naturally strike up conversations with strangers. They are really strong networkers. So they love if your woo is high, more often than not, they're going to be the people that feel energized when they go into a room and have 100 there's 100 people and they have 100 5-minute conversations, right? And they'll walk away feeling energized. They can build quick connections with people too. So they can make other people feel comfortable and at ease quickly through making like a fast connection. So, though all of those are different attributes of woo. Woo stands for win others over. The number one question I get from people when they see all the words of Clifton Strengths, they're like, "What the heck is woo?" And the second question is usually, "Why is my empathy so low?" So it's if you take the assessment and your empathy is low, just know that it does not mean you're not empathetic, but it does mean people that lead with empathy from a Clifton Strengths perspective, their first thought is going to be, how might this person feel? So I used to work with a lead consultant. She was an amazing strategic consultant. She had no strategic themes in her top 10. She had all of these like feelings, like relationship based themes. But what she did was like, she was the head of strategy. But she said the reason that I'm so good at strategy is because I lead with thinking, well, if I was in this other person's shoes, what strategy would I want? How would I want this to be approached? What's important to me? And so that goes back to my example. You don't have to have strategic in your top 10 to be strategic. This person used her empathy to be strategic. So any strength can do any job. Any set of themes can get at any outcome. It's all just in doing it in a way that works from your strengths, and it's going to feel authentic to you, and it's going to be, you're going to see better results as well, right? Higher quality of life, more engaged in your work, more productive. So I know this is really small. I don't expect you to be able to read what's on here, but if and when you do take the Clifton Strengths assessment, just for a little bit of context on what you'll get when you take it, so that you have enough to be dangerous with. Oh, and did I lose my screen? Oh, we're back. We're going back and forth. Um,
No, I apologize for that. I was trying to upload something. I didn't realize that it was going to take over
mm,
your slides.
no worries.
So, is this the right slide
Yes.
for you?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I apologize.
No worries.
Bye.
um, so when you this is the $60 assessment. So it gives you all 34 themes and it stack ranks them. So it says you on the left here, these are the top 10 themes, the themes you do think and feel the most of. These are considered to be dominant. It means they're always on. I refer to your top 10 themes as the tools in your toolbox. So what I mean by that is when you have to go do any job, those are the tools you have at your disposal to use. If you have a job that is at the bottom of your report, like I always use this like a lame example, at like lame in the sense that like I don't know a whole lot about tools or home improvement. But let's say I've got a job that calls for a screwdriver, and that's my number 34 theme. The themes at the bottom of your report, those are your lesser themes, lesser talents. So those are the things you do think and feel the least of. Does it just because it's at the bottom? Again, strengths is not a cop out to say, like, oh, well, I'm not good at it. I just don't have to do it ever. No, you might have something at the bottom. And let's say whatever your number 34 is a job, right? A job that calls for a screwdriver. You got to get a screw in, you need a screwdriver. It's your number 34. You can't use a screwdriver to get the job done. So, you've got a couple options. One is be honest with yourself. Is this a job I have to do? Going back to my example of the color coded closet, is this something I really need, or do I just feel like I need to have it? Or like that quote, right? Like, have people just told me I need to do this thing, but I actually don't. So that's one. Do I really need to get the screw in? Let's say yes, right? That's like the least likely option we get to pull on. So, yes, I do need to get the screw in. Number two, does somebody else have a screwdriver that I can borrow? So, that's the example of my husband. Can I borrow his strength to help get at the outcome? And the third option is nope, I've got to do it. I can't borrow the screwdriver. Let me look at what tools I have in my toolbox. Oh, okay. Well, my number one is a hammer. And so I can hammer that screw in. It's not the intended tool for the job, but it still got the screw into the hole and ultimately achieved what I needed it to achieve. So that's the way to think about strengths is you should be working from your dominant or your top 10 strengths to get at the outcomes that you want. You're going to feel more fulfilled. You're going to be more engaged in the work that you're doing, more energized and more productive. So, and again, that's not just rah rah, I'm making this up. That's A, based in research, and B, I have lived that experience myself. Just in the more I work from strengths, the more, as long as I've been an entrepreneur, I really have the ability to work, like carve out a career that pulls on my strengths. I have also lived that experience of feeling more fulfilled and energized in my work and definitely more productive. Um, and please, as I'm going, I love everybody that's been super interactive. That's been made it a lot of fun. So thank you. But please ask questions as we go. I know I'm number one input, and so that means I love to be like, oh my gosh, I have all these exciting things to share, and let me tell you all the things. But I also want to customize it to, that's my individualization, customize it to what you need. So if you have particular questions as we're going at any point, please ask them. I will also share. And maybe let me drop it in the chat. As I mentioned, I have a free Facebook group, and so if you have questions at any point, let me just make sure I have the right one in here. If you have questions at any point about anything we talk about today, like especially if you take your assessment and you haven't, I love that you would even consider using a hammer for screw. Yes. But if after you take the assessment, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, yes, but I'm also now overwhelmed. I have so many questions, right? About about what I'm seeing in my report. Part of what I do in my Facebook group is I have people paste in that first page of the assessment. Let me go back to that. I'll have people paste in this first page and ask a question like, hey, what does this mean? Or this is what I do for work. How can I use these more? So, so please, I would recommend, if nothing else, if you take the assessment, just join my free Facebook group. I do free calls on it. I answer questions. This is definitely information overload. Like the Clifton Strengths is extremely, it goes very deep. So it takes a lot of time to understand the information and understand how to use it. Um, and also feel free, again, if you're on Instagram, you can also message me questions there as well. Um, so thank you, Robin. Yeah, I love answering people's questions in the groups, and especially because other people will usually chime in and be like, I also am high responsibility and I can resonate with what you just shared. And here's what I do about it, or here's how I've overcome it, or I'm still working through it and I could use help on it too. Um, so the other thing about Clifton Strengths, and I think that this, even the 34 words can be very overwhelming. And so what they did is, in addition to grouping all of the talents into themes, is they filtered them into 4 different what they call domains. And so I think I have it here. So there's 34 themes. You can see them here straddled across the 4 different domains. The orange influencing domain is based on how you influence others. So it is all focused, like people that are dominant in influencing. I always say, like, they like to make things better. They like to elevate things. They like to speak up and make sure other people's ideas are heard, their voices are heard, that their impact is known. So that's the orange influencing domain. Executing, that's focused on making things happen. So, and I always say, I'm going to flip back to this report first, because if you take this on your own, it isn't this is not something you would really notice unless you coach with me on it, right? Or heard from me in like a free webinar. Everybody on the first page of their report has this gray box here. Again, it's probably hard to see, but this person, it says they lead with relationship building Clifton Strengths themes. Everybody has a leading domain. So in your top 10, you usually have anywhere between 2 and 4 of the domains represented, 2 and 4 of the colors. But everybody has a leading domain. And so what that means is, what your number one theme is when you were answering those 167 questions, you answered the most of your number one theme, the second most of your number 2 theme, etc. What determines what domain you lead with, which of these colors you lead with, is the intensity with which you answer the questions. So when you're and for those of you that haven't taken the assessment, it will ask you to choose between 2 things. It gives you a sliding scale and it says, okay, would you rather go for a walk on the beach? I don't remember if that's an actual question. It's been a while since I took the assessment. Would you rather go for a walk on the beach or sit down and read a book? Right. And you might see that and be like, oh, both, right? You choose in the middle. Or you might say, okay, yes, I feel more strongly about the book or the beach. So you're given 167 of those scenarios. And so the frequency one is like, right, you answered the most questions about the read a book and similar ones to that. But what determines what domain you lead with is the questions that you answered with the most intensity. So this person, even though their number one theme is a purple executing theme, the domain they lead with is relationship building. And so what that means, everybody has a leading domain. If this person who leads with relationship building, their first thought when they go to solve a problem or have a conversation, even though they're going to have a mixture of colors in their top 10, their first thought is going to be to pull on the relationship building side. So they might say, how does this information help me understand this person better? Or I need to go share this with this person or my team, and I can see the opportunities within these relationships. So typically people that lead relationship building are going to think of like the who, not how. I always say they're the most natural at that. People that lead with influencing, their first thought, how can I make this bigger? How can I elevate this? How can I make sure this person's ideas are heard? People that lead with purple executing, their first thought is what needs to get done? What are the next steps? How can I move this into action? And then people that lead with green is strategic thinking. So their first thought is to think and to process, right? So it's like, how does this fit into what I already know and understand? So at, I also ordered these. I put these in the order at the pace with which these colors move. So if you lead with influencing, you those are the fastest paced themes. If you lead with executing, those are the second fastest. Now, when we start to get on the slower side is blue, relationship building, and green is the slowest. Makes sense because green, the first thing they do is to think, right? So that takes time. And then the other ways to think about these domains is I say like people versus outcomes. The two people focused themes are the orange and the blue. Orange, I always say, goes wide with people. It's the fastest. It goes wide. You give them an inch, they can take a mile when it comes to people, ideas, things like that. Blue goes slower because they go deeper with people. The nature of building relationships takes time. So that building and nurturing of relationships makes it people focused, but slower. The outcomes focused themes are green and purple. And so purple moves faster, executing, right? Their first thought when they leave a meeting is like, what needs to get done? The first thought for somebody who's green when they leave a meeting is like, let me build out the strategy before I start to go execute, right? So they're both focused on outcomes, but one moves a little bit faster than the other. So again, everybody has a makeup and a combination of, usually they have, even if you only have two in, not only, even if you have two in your top 10, usually you have three in your top 15 of just a combination. And most common is for people to have three in their top 10. And then sometimes people have four, sometimes people have two. So these are just the different themes within the that you'll see on the report. And I want to talk about, just kind of with our remaining time, talk about some concepts of Clifton Strengths, and I want to hit on weaknesses. So within Clifton Strengths, they refer to it as a journey because it very much is. The first time you take your report, the first time I took it, I was like, what are these words, these colors? I saw words that I was like, what does input even mean? And that's my number one. I always joke it took me an entire year to understand my first strength. Like I joke about it because it's like, wow, I can't believe it took me a year, but it really did take me a year. I was like, does that just mean I'm really insecure and I need a lot of input before I make a decision? No, that's not what it means. But that's what I thought when I read input. But no, it just means I like to take in information so that, and then but I specifically take in information that I think is going to have utility because I think I'm going to use it for something later. So that's the input, needs, and output. So the first phase of the Clifton Strengths journey is name it. So understand and identify your Clifton Strengths themes. So you're going to see these words on the report. What does that word mean? And what does it mean for me? Because my Clifton Strengths report, and I don't know if I have a sample in here. Oh my gosh, spoiler alert. Okay, no, I don't. So within the Clifton Strengths report, there's also, it's highly customized. So we'll stick with my number one theme is input. It will describe, okay, the definition of input is all the things I've said so far about input, but it will give an entire page of information about this is how input shows up for you uniquely, because my input is unique because my number 2 is futuristic and my number 34 is command and my number 16 is empathy. And so my input, the way my input is going to look is going to be different from somebody else whose number 1 is input, and your report will read differently from them. So if you take it and you have a friend or a partner that takes it and you have any of the same themes, if you read each other's colored boxes in your report, they will read differently, which is really cool. So it's highly customized. So that's the name it portion, is understand what it is and understand what it means and how it looks for you. The second portion is to essentially to embrace them, to say like, yes. And it took me a year to understand my input theme. It probably took me another year to embrace it. Right. Where I was like, yes, this is who I am. And this is absolutely powerful. Like I can see how it can get in my way sometimes. Just because it's a pie doesn't automatically make it a strength. I can see how it can get in my way. And I'm going to do what I can to strengthen that, to make sure not only does it not get in my way, But because this is something that's unique about me, I'm going to learn how to use it intentionally. And that's the aim it portion. And like, I am not a I'm high input. Actually, oh my gosh, I just realized that in this moment. I always say when I'm coaching with clients or doing a webinar, I learn something new every time I coach with somebody or go through something on Clifton Strengths. And in this moment, that I I always say this when I'm talking about Clifton Strengths is like, I don't want you to just have interesting information. Like, I just don't, I'm not a believer in that. And that's because my number one's input. Input does not like to take in information unless it has some utility, right? It has to have something to use it for. And so I just realized that now that's why I want people to be able to aim their strengths, is because I don't like nice to know information. I like nice to, it has to translate to something. And so that's the aim it portion of the Clifton Strengths journey. And what I love again about that the report is it says, this is what Clifton Strengths is. This is how it likely looks for you. Here's some blind spots for your top 10 that you might not be aware of. And here's 5 bullet points of ways you can start using that strength today more intentionally. So it gives you examples and ways that you can use it more. So it's like it gives you language to say these are the things you naturally do, and here are ways you can use it more. So I want to hit on weaknesses. I already talked about this before, in that at the bottom of the report, people will see that and they'll either say, how do I get those things at the bottom higher? And no, the answer, right? If you don't have a screwdriver in your toolbox, if that's your number 34, the goal is not to say, how do I get a screwdriver to be in my toolbox? No, Clifton Strengths, you're only supposed to take it once in your life. It's the results are not supposed to change. And the goal is never to change the order. It's just to change the way you use them. And so, whatever's at the bottom, if it's not getting in your way, if you never need a screwdriver in what you do for work or in your personal life, it's just a lesser theme. It's not something you pull on. There's nothing you need to do about that. If it is getting at your way in your way to have something at the bottom, then you need to create strategies for how you're going to solve for that. And I already gave some examples, like really the 3 key examples of the strategies you can use. So, just because it's at the bottom isn't automatically a weakness. Similarly, just because it's at the top doesn't automatically make it a strength. I'll stick with the example of my input, right? If I am constantly collecting and aggregating and archiving things, I might do that so much that I don't move into action, right? So that can be my input theme showing up as a weakness because I'm going slow because I think I need more and more and more information before I move into action. And so that's an example of my input theme showing up as a weakness. And so there are ways to combat that, to say, okay, the goal is not number 30. Discipline is one of the least common themes to have in your top 5. So most people have discipline low. So you're not alone, Robin. Yeah, the least common themes to have in your top 5 are called self-assurance, command, in this order. Self-assurance is the least common, then command, significance, discipline, and context. So again, those words aren't going to mean a ton to people that haven't taken it. But yes, you're not alone in having low discipline. So it's absolutely a superpower if you do have it up high, because you have a tool that not a lot of other people have up high. And so for me, with my number one, if I'm getting stuck in like data collection mode, I can pull on my number 5 achiever and say, okay, Rosie, like you need to move this into action. So like, what's one step you're going to take today to start moving some of this forward? So I might pull on my achiever to get me out of input mode, for example. So the goal is never to say, let me take my input and turn it lower, because it's my number one theme. It's already something I do think and feel a lot of. So it's not like, Rosie, you need to do think and feel less of this. That's how I'm wired. I'm just going to do that whether I want to or not. The goal is to say, okay, if I'm doing it too much or these are getting in my way, how do I pull in some of my other strengths to balance it out a little bit? And I kind of said this, but I want to reiterate this third bullet point here. Areas of lesser talent never develop into areas of strength. So that's like your number 34 discipline, Robin. The goal is not to say, how do I get my discipline to be higher? The goal is to say, Discipline is important for everybody. Just because it's your number 34, right? Like there are times in our everybody's lives where we have to be disciplined. But the way that you're going to be disciplined is should come from your top 10. So find ways to build discipline that come from your top 10. And so um I know we're up at we're just about at time, so I don't want to go like too deep into examples. Just have like two last things that I want to share, which is when you take the report, the likelihood of having just the same top 5 themes in the same order is just shy of 1 in 34 million. So, like, that just to me, again, goes to say, like, our themes are so unique to only have the same top 5 in the same order is 1 in 33 some million, right? And so imagine how unique each of our strengths profiles are when we look at the full 34. And so it's absolutely everybody has unique talents, and it is absolutely a superpower for you to know how to use them because it is very rare for others to have the same strengths as you and to be able to pull on them in the same way. And um oh wait, Chunky Chuju said two key concepts that have made an impression were that we're going with our best strengths rather than trying to improve at everything, including our weaknesses. Yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I'm excited to hear your second one. And as you're doing that, I think I just have this last one, and then the statistic I already shared, which is um, like ways to invest in your Clifton strengths. Look at things that went well. Look back and say, oh my gosh, I killed it at this thing last week. What strengths was I using in that instance and how can I use more of it? Right? Like that, I think that is the easiest way to start using strengths is look at the things that have gone well and reflect on those and find where you've used your strengths. Sharing your strengths, though, like I always say, if you take the report, have somebody that's really close to you read the results. They will see things in the results that you don't see. They're meant to be shared. The more you talk about your strengths, like I just learned something about my own strengths in this conversation, right? The more you talk about it, the more you learn. Um, so I want to read what Chunky Chuju said. Secondly, your strengths can get the job done even when you are lacking at something. Yes, 100%. Like that's one of the biggest things I want people to take away is you have all the tools that you need. It's just a matter of learning how to use them to get all of the jobs done that you need to get done. So thank you for sharing your takeaways. That means a lot. Thank you. Um, and these are the statistics I mentioned. 8%. Oh shoot, I may have said 9%. I meant 8% greater productivity and just shy of 13% greater productivity for teams that work from strengths versus individuals. So thank you so much for having me, Robin. I know you said don't stop sharing my screen, but you can pull my slides off. I think the I dropped this link as I said that. I'm like, oh, I forgot I have one more theme or one more slide. This is my free Facebook community, just a QR code. You can also follow the link I dropped in the chat. If nothing else, if you take the assessment, this is a great place to go to just get more free resources. And I do more of these calls that are really helpful after you've taken the assessment. So I do a lot of calls for people. Once you know your strengths, that's when the journey begins. Oh wait, NS220U. I was thinking about the probability of two or more having identical results of that test. So, fun fact, the company I was at when we rolled out the Clifton Strengths Assessment, they were about 10,000 employees. And they had two people who had identical profiles. Like their number 1 through 34 were identical. And Gallup was like, oh
Wow.
my gosh, they did a huge like case study on it. They're like, I can't believe this. So it was very rare. It was just kind of crazy that I got to see that at the company I was at. But yes, very unique, and highly recommend. It's a worthwhile investment, especially considering it's an assessment you only take once. Um, so yeah,
Were
thank
they
you.
were they were they twins?
They lived in different parts of they were both in the US, but different parts. One was like West Coast, one was East Coast. Yes, and I didn't get more information internally. Like it was Gallup that was like sharing about how excited they were about it, but I didn't like talk to the employees or anything. But I just thought that was really cool.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, this is I just when I met Rosie and afterwards, after I took the Clifton Strengths profile, and I attended a number of her coaching sessions, group coaching. Um, And every single time I walked away thinking and gaining and growing from the content that I learned. Um, this is, to me, it's just mind blowing where you go with it. I know in my particular case, not that people are necessarily interested, but I it was an aha moment for me because I had been so focused on just getting through life that
Mm.
I'd never really stopped to think about what my strengths were. And when I saw my report, I went, "Oh my God, that's why I'm the way I am." And an example, a case in point is my children are always saying to me, "Oh, Bob, you ask too many questions. Don't ask so many questions." But Rosie, guess what my number one
Learner.
I'm an input.
Oh, you're input too?
Input. Yeah, I'm input, and
Oh my gosh, I forgot that. Are you also high
yeah.
learner?
Yeah, I'm 4. 4 is
Okay.
learner. I'll show you here. Um, so this is my DNA, my strength DNA, and I'm all blue and green, mostly green in the top 10. And it's just it opened my eyes as to why I'd had some of the challenges that I'd had, both
Mm.
personally and professionally. And on a personal level, it was like, well, now I can tell my kids that that's just tough. That's who I am. I don't I don't have to feel bad about it anymore. So,
Yes,
anyway,
yes. Yeah, oh my gosh, I remember now that I see that, yes, you have all of your top 5 are green. A lot of
yeah,
thinking. Um,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, all of them. That's right. All 5 of them are green, and then I don't get into blue until 6. But, and then my oranges are kinda scattered through there. But anyway, so for those that are listening and not used to what we're talking about, you need to go take the Clifton Strengths test. It's going to be life affirming and eye-opening, and then get involved in Rosie's free group, because you'll learn and you'll grow from each other when, like she said, when you start talking with other people who've had the benefit of, Rosie's help and being in that Facebook group, and also getting coached by her, um, you grow leaps and bounds in how you navigate your life. So I highly recommend it. I also want to let everybody know that you will be getting an email after this show that will give you the links to go and either sign up for coaching with Rosie, get involved with her group coaching, and take the test. So you're going to have all those resources for you. Um, Good. I'm so glad that you're excited to take the test. It's worth it. Believe me, it's worth 100 times more than what they charge. So I don't want to take people's time. I just want to say thank you, Rosie. Oh my gosh. I knew that we were going to finish strong with you. And I was
Thank
so
you.
grateful that you decided to do this on a Friday. So thank you very,
Yeah,
very
thank you for
much for
having me.
everything. Yeah,
Thank you. It's been great to be
absolutely.
here, and thank you to everybody that participated. It makes it so much more fun. So, thank you for that. Oh,
Before
Robin,
we
do you mind if
leave,
I
yeah, I
yeah, do you
want
mind
you
if I
to
answer that?
answer his question. Yeah.
What are some of the common challenges that arise when people with different Clifton strengths work together? Great question. So, it it really depends. I could go let me say a couple things. So, if you remember when I talked about the colors, orange moves the fastest and is people focused. Green moves the slowest and is outcomes focused. So those are the most opposite because right, we got fastest, slowest, people outcomes. So sometimes they can go like this. because orange, they want to like, they'll like burn the house down, right? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, more is more. We got to go fast, speed, this, that, and the other thing. We got all these ideas. That's the power of orange. I say they'll burn the house down if like there's a bunch of oranges in a room together. Like you never know what you're gonna get. Same things if there's a bunch of greens in a room together, right? Like they'll all be like sitting around thinking. And so sometimes like it can take sometimes there are natural synergies that form. Like a lot of times with really strong partners, I see like a yin and a yang. Some of my closest friends are orange. I'm all green. I'm green and blue and purple, no orange whatsoever. And some of my closest friends are heavy orange. And so we've like, yes, sometimes we go like this, but we've learned through like trust and common values and common goals and things that we've built together that we really work like this. And so I can pull on the things that speed me up when I need to be slowed down, or excuse me, speed me up when I'm slowing myself down, and vice versa. I slow them down, or I give right my input. I'm like, oh, you've never thought about all of these things. I have all of this data to share with you that you wouldn't slow down to learn. So more often than not, especially like whether it's like spouses or like even sometimes work partners, like they have like a yin and a yang type of dynamic. So sometimes it happens naturally. Sometimes it takes intentional work for people that have opposite or different Clifton strengths to work together. The number one thing though that the research has shown from Gallup is that the best teams or partnerships are not necessarily the most well-rounded. So the goal is not to say, okay, I'm green and purple. I need to find somebody who's orange and blue. The goal is to the highest performing teams are the ones that have visibility to each other's strengths and know how to use them. And so and great if you can pull from everybody all these different colors and strengths, that's great, but it's not a must have. So I hope that generally answers your question. It's like sometimes people can butt heads, but more often than not, and especially with intentional work, usually there's a lot of harmony that can happen.
I'd like to kind of add to that answer too. I think that, knowing the strengths of your team is extremely important. Add on to that the various different techniques that you've been learning all week, Ahmed, it's you start with the foundation of learning people's strengths and a foundation of them recognizing where they need to or where they could pull on other people's strengths and having that team synergy of knowledge, um, and then layer on the transparent dialogue, the open communication, the emotional intelligence, and the other things that we've talked about this week. And so gosh, I wish you've got a very difficult job. Ahmed works with teams, um, and I think that you're constantly juggling what different people are like. So you have a tough job. You have a tough job, but there's lots of different tools that you can pull on, and this is a foundational one. Absolutely foundational. Would you agree to that,
100%.
Rosie?
It's such an easy place to start too. Right? Like once
Yeah.
you especially if you're on a team, the number one thing is to share your strengths with each other. At least just your top 5. Some people like get into scarcity mode, right? Because they're like, "Oh, I don't want somebody to see my number 34," which I understand. So I think the best place to start is just with teams. If everybody takes their report, their assessment to just share their top 5 with each other, and it helps them start to appreciate the unique qualities of what somebody has. Like I'll just share a quick example. My number 2 is futuristic. My husband's is number 34. And even in our marriage, we've been married for I don't know, 6 years. We've been together for 10. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this thing about you that always frustrated me, now I realize it's just not your strength. And I'm going to stop expecting you to do that thing. Like I'm just going to do it for us in our relationship." And no, right? Like so it can be very freeing in that way where it's like whether you know what's at the bottom for somebody else, like also what you see up high, you're like, "Oh my gosh, yes, these are the things you do. How can we have you do more of them?" So it's very empowering to have on teams. And I always recommend if you are doing with this with teams on your own, to start with top 5 before you start to give visibility to the bottom, because people go into scarcity mode, and that can be, if you don't have a coach or somebody to guide you through it, it can just do more harm than good. So if you have your teams do it and they're sharing with each other, share from top 5, there's only good things that can come out of that.
Great, great, great advice. Thank you. All right. I don't want to keep everybody too late. We're already over time, but it's been so worth every moment of it. Thank you so much, Rosie. And I'm going to say,
Thank
and
you.
if there's no more questions, we're going to close now. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll watch for your emails to continue the challenge and keep in touch so that we can continue to support you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you, Robin. Bye-bye.